Welcome back once again, everyone, to Talking Point. I'm Mayor Mike, and we have a special edition today talking about the upcoming referendums on the November ballot. Joining me are Director Scott Beduhn, Director of Public Works, and Director Ryan Kernosky, Director of Community Development. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
As we all know in the city, the November ballot will have 4 transportation referendum questions on it, all of which are regular routine things that the city has done over the years. 2 of them are actually just very literally stuff we do every year with road maintenance, and Scott will talk about that in a second. The other 2 are directly related to economic development, which would come up at any time when we have a developer who needs some additional infrastructure, but we're kind of getting pre-approval for these. The important thing to note is that none of these will adversely affect your taxes in any way, more so than any other year, really. We budget a certain amount of our property taxes to go to road maintenance, and Scott's going to talk about those. And the 2 development-related ones are going to be covered through what's called tax incremental financing, which basically means the growth of that district, that certain zone, is going to be used to pay for the infrastructure, not my tax money and your tax money. So that's important to know. All 4 of these questions are critical to the way city does business. And the only reason they're on a referendum ballot, of course, is because of the August referendum that passed. None of these 4 have anything to do with Business 51, and we've already had advocates from the Southside Business Association supporting these 4 referenda questions. So, Scott, 2 of the regular run-of-the-mill business type things that we do are road reconstructions and road resurfacings every year.
Yes.
Tell us about those 2 questions in relation to the regular work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, because part of just our general maintenance of the roads, our large transportation system, and as you mentioned, these are annual projects. They change, of course, location depending on the streets we pick for the year, but the actual concept of having a reconstruct, a resurfacing project is something we try to tackle every year. The difference between the 2, because there are some differences, and why there's 2 projects, is the more significant one is the reconstruction project. And in this case, we're not actually just taking care of the pavement, we're removing everything. So it's the pavement, curb, gutter, sidewalk, pretty much everything within the right-of-way, as well as addressing the utilities that lie beneath it. So it's the total reconstruction of everything that the city has as far as infrastructure within that corridor. And it's important we do that because everything has a life, and we need to get there. And eventually we can't ignore what's beneath the road as well. So it's important that we have that type of project as part of our arsenal. The other part, as you mentioned, the resurfacing project is the other part that we try to accomplish. The life of the asphalt at the surface, or even concrete roads like that, is not going to last as long as the utilities beneath it. So there's going to be an interim time after we even reconstruct or build a road where we need to address that failing pavement. But all other things are generally in good shape. So that's what we do, in some streets that, are otherwise not yet ready, infrastructure's in that old or in that bad a shape, that we can get the next life cycle of the asphalt, roughly 30 to maybe 40 years. So if we're not looking to do any utility work, then it becomes a resurfacing project and we address the pavement at the surface.
Okay. And it's important to note, too, that we don't just willy-nilly fix roads. We have what's called a PACER. It's an acronym for something. I don't remember what it is. Maybe you do, but it's irrelevant. What it does is it rates the road, the surface of the road, and everything beneath the surface of the road to tell you what kind of condition. It's a scale of 1 to 10. And I've heard people talk about, well, I don't think this road should be done this year. Maybe you should do this one because I think this one's worse. We're not talking about how we choose which roads. There's a certain synergy when we choose roads that are in the same area, we get a better price. But they're all based on this PACER system. So give me an idea of what conditions are on the roads that we've chosen this year.
Sure, yes, PACER, and even don't quote me. I often look at it and yet I just forget it as soon as I look it up. But it's pavement. It's pavement surface evaluation ratings, I believe is what it otherwise stands for. And it is just a look at the surface to identify what the condition of the road is, what are the failure causes by looking to see how the surface of the pavement looks. And it's something that the state requires us to do, so it's not even the scale and stuff isn't something the city came up with. It's something we're required by the state to do every other year, so every odd year. And we use that information. So, and it is a 1 to 10 scale. A 10 would be a brand new road. So after we complete our projects this year, those will rate at a 10. However, then as they deteriorate, they of course go down the scale. And as far as asphalt goes, a 1 to give the viewers kind of a visualization, essentially think gravel road, honestly. It's really kind of breaking up and the surface is falling apart and you're gonna probably even hear the stones kicking up because the asphalt is broken up and that aggregate at the surface at least is kind of kicking up and then it kind of just, falls in between there. And just a little bit more on that, thinking of how the rating goes is that, when we get to about a 4, that's where things start to change. We do different treatments, within there, but 4 is kind of the break off to how we drastically look differently at things. And so as they slide down to, and our target is usually somewhere around a 2 as far as any of these projects go. So we have more 2s than what we're going to attack next year. But like you said, it's a matter of trying to package the whole thing together, not just the pavement, but the other needs that may exist, as well as finding streets that we can package a project together to get the best price.
Right, and price is, of course, very important with the cost of everything going up. The average condition of these roads, 1, 2, 3?
They're typically 2s. Usually we'll find a group that may include one small section of 3 because it's convenient to do it at the time. But typically we try to let those go, and occasionally they do include some 1s. We do have several in the city.
Yeah. And what's the average rating of a road in the city?
The average rating of a road in the city is about 5.5 if we just took the actual average of all the numbers across the city.
That means half of our roads are below average.
It's to say, look at it in that respect, it's good. But a 5 is not a bad road.
Yeah, no, good. And it's important to note that too. And, if anybody wants to see what we have planned for 2024, 2025, 2026, and so on, you can do that through our capital budget. That's not set in stone, of course, but those are the planned roads. So we try and get all of these fixed.
Correct. Yeah, we definitely have a lookout to see what it is, trying to plan ahead for the improvements we're otherwise going to make. And all that is included within the budget, so there's the look ahead there for the next 5 years.
And just one final question. None of the roads that we have slated for reconstruction or resurfacing are Business 51 related or narrowing or through conversion processes,
That's
right?
correct.
None
Yes.
of those.
Correct.
These are normal
Replacing
routine things.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott. And Director Kernosky, the other 2, I think, are way more exciting than the regular road maintenance.
That's not fair to
Sorry,
say.
Scott.
That's not fair.
But, you and I work on development projects almost daily, and some of them go further along than others. We don't, make infrastructure decisions until generally we have a signed developer's agreement. But we know that the likelihood of us needing some of these big chunks of infrastructure were going to happen at some point.
Correct.
We've got some developments in the works that, of course, we can't talk about yet because we don't have that developer's agreement, but they need a couple of critical components out in the East Park Commerce Center, which is generally the furthest east and south of Highway 10, where we've slated for some of our significant growth. Lineage Logistics, for example, is growing out there. Our transportation hub's out there. Land's End is out there. Talk about the 2 questions that we have. And again, I want to remind our listeners and viewers that these 2 projects are not paid for through my taxes or your taxes, but they're paid for by the taxes of the businesses within that district and only for that growth. So we're very careful to make sure that is it's covering the debt that would be incurred, and those businesses that economic development will pay for all of the needs that we have. So let's talk about the rail sidetrack first, and tell me why we need that.
Sure, absolutely. So since the creation of East Park Commerce Center in 2012, the city has identified that area for a rail industrial park with access. For those viewers who are more familiar with the rail system through Stevens Point, Canadian National has a main line that goes right through the center of our community. And it's a real economic benefit to Stevens Point. And what we're trying to do essentially is create a secondary track or a side track south of the existing Canadian National main line, which will allow boxcars, cars that might handle steel, things of that nature, to go off the main line, come into East Park Commerce Center, and go to various other manufacturing industrial users. And really, Mayor, as you had mentioned, is just getting the approval to move those projects forward through the referendum vote is going to be hypercritical to ensuring that our future developments, future economic development, job growth and creation continues in East Park Commerce Center.
So let me ask you this. Why can't the railroad pay for that?
It's a very good question, and I don't know if there's a good answer other than we have always asked whether or not CN would be interested in providing some type of assistance, and they say we'll support the projects, but we typically don't provide assistance with that siding track and spurs.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. I knew the answer. That was just for our viewers and listeners. But that sidetrack is going to give us an opportunity to serve one or more businesses within East Park Commerce Center. Now, of course, you know this and I know this, but our viewers are now going to find out that we're not going to build this until we have a signed development agreement.
Right.
We're just looking for prior approval because it's a lot easier to talk to the developer and say, yeah, we already have pre-approval for this sidetrack. It's much more difficult to say, well, yeah, we could put the sidetrack in, but we have to go to a public vote, and I can't let you know until next April or next November. It's a lot more difficult to try and negotiate with a developer when there's that uncertainty. So we're just asking for prior approval. They may not get built in 2023 or 2024. I can pretty much assure you that at some point, though, they will get built.
Let's hope. Yeah, that's the one thing. And my experience in almost a decade of economic development is the fewer barriers to development a municipality has, the higher likelihood that you're going to score high in their site selection process and their criteria.
So the last one is the extension of Badger Avenue. We all know where Badger Avenue comes to the north of Highway 10, goes out by the soccer fields. But this one is actually south or north of Double H, coming into that East Park Commerce Center. Talk about why we need that quickly.
Yeah, sure. Badger Avenue is directly behind Land's End. So if you're facing Land's End, right behind it. And essentially, we have to continue to build road infrastructure in East Park to make it an attractive place for developers, businesses to relocate or to expand their operations. Currently, EM Copps Drive extends to the east from Burlowski Road, but the next major step, not only for the road infrastructure, is going south or north-south with the Badger Avenue extension. Probably more important than that is making sure that we have the water looped, and so there's adequate water pressure to service those businesses that are looking to come into East Park Commerce Center. And as you had mentioned earlier, there is no financial impact on the residential taxpayers. All of those improvements are paid for, and all that debt that is taken on is serviced from those new users and the increase in property taxes. And I think that's a really critical component. I'm glad you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, it certainly is. And quite honestly, all of these are really critical to the way we do business. We have an obligation to grow our tax base. Not willy-nilly, of course, like I said earlier. We work very diligently to make sure that the businesses that are here or open here are something that is fitting for the Stevens Point community. And then, of course, the roads, that's a never-ending battle. It's like the Golden Gate Bridge, right? You finish painting it, and you got to go back and start all over again because that's how it is. So roads are a never-ending battle, and it's unfortunate that we have to deal with recurring road costs in a manner that is this referendum. But I understand why it happened. I encourage everybody to find out a little bit more about what the questions actually mean. Hopefully, this gave you a good insight into what we're going to be dealing with in November. Keep in mind, it's a two-sided ballot, and state law, of course, prohibits us from encouraging you to vote one way or the other, but I think that you've got enough evidence here to make your own decision. If you do have further questions in relation to any of those 4 questions on the ballot, contact our offices before you go vote. Of course, we can't give you any information at the polling location. That's also a violation of state law, but I would encourage you to contact my office, Director Beduhn's office, Director Kernosky's office, talk to your alderperson, and get accurate information so you are an informed voter when it comes to that November election. I think hopefully we'll see what happens in November. But I thank you both for being part of the show. This was a nice short one, special edition of Talking Point, if you will. Thank you both for your time, and hopefully any citizens that have questions will reach out. So, thank you once again for joining us on this special edition of Talking Point, and I'm Mayor Mike. We'll see you next time.
For more information about the transportation projects on the November 8th ballot, contact Director Ryan Kernosky, Director Scott Beduhn, or Mayor Wiza. Talking Point with Mayor Mike Wiza is produced by Stevens Point Community Media.